This is Dark Seed, a 1992 computer game with the art of H.R. Giger. This is Parappa the Rapper, a 1996 PlayStation game with the art of Rodney Greenblatt. This is Cool Cool Toon, a 2000 Dreamcast game with the art of Ippei Gyobu. And this is Gitaru Man, a 2001 PlayStation 2 game with the art of Mitsuru Nakamura. As far as I'm aware, these are the four most comprehensive and arresting examples of a single established visual artist from outside of games having their style transmuted into a playable experience. And they're all from the same 10-year span. Now, Dark Seed is an adventure game, and 1992 hardware struggled to convey the look of Giger at its lower resolutions, to the extent that the developers ended up opting to use a more limited color palette to squeeze more pixel-by-pixel detail out of the game in exchange, at Giger's insistence. It works because his art isn't very colorful. But the other three games have a lot in common as being representative of the era of relatively early disc-based systems. That technology unlocked CD-quality audio and a ton of on-disc storage, meaning that flashier experiences were possible. All three of these games had the same idea: to provide relatively basic gameplay, but to utterly charm on audio and visuals. Parappa, Cool Cool Toon, and Gitaru Man are all story-focused, stage-based rhythm games, essentially playable musicals. Compared to almost any other game of their era, they're incredibly distinctive. To this day, the only games that look like Parappa are the other rhythm games with Rodney Greenblatt's art, like Jammer Lammy, and of course Parappa 2. And absolutely nothing else in games looks like either Cool Cool Toon or Gitaru Man. While these games were coming out, a different, arcade-native form of rhythm game was developing in parallel, based around a la carte selections in what were essentially playable jukeboxes. Think Konami's Bimani family of games like Beatmania, and Dance Dance Revolution, or Harmonix's Guitar Hero and Rock Band. The playable musical style of rhythm game in the mold of Parappa was popular, but less common. Almost invariably, they had smaller track lists, more cutscenes filling up space between the playable stages, and more focus on spectacle and charm rather than challenge or showmanship. In Parappa, the rapping dog is the star. In DDR, the player is the star. Over time, because they were more gameplay-focused, the jukebox-style titles held onto a devoted audience that had developed a taste for abstract sensory overload and high-speed technical precision like this, or this, or this. Maybe you and I stopped paying attention to them, but they're thriving in their own niche. The Parappa-style games, because they're less challenge-focused, were aiming for a more general audience, and when that audience was distracted by a new set of jangling keys, well, they dried up. The Gitaru Man company leveraged the novelty of the DS stylus to make Oendan and Elite Beat agents, and the Parappa company leveraged the novelty of the Wiimote to make Major Minor, and then that was that. Like with a lot of other genres that fate had been unkind to, the makers of these games staged a comeback on Kickstarter in 2017, and that Kickstarter completely failed. The market for the story-focused, spectacle-heavy rhythm game had evaporated. But sometimes all it takes is for one or two indie devs with a dream to make the impossible possible. I come to the rhythm game square of my bingo board not as a neophyte, but as a lapsed enthusiast. Back in the day, I was actually very into this spectacle-focused, story-based rhythm game. Parappa the Rapper, Jammer Lammy, Gitaru Man, Space Channel 5, Oendan, and so forth. In addition to being into other rhythm games also, like Dance Dance Revolution and Rock Band. The latter of which I got really into, and that ended up in the moment at the time eclipsing other rhythm games for me to the extent that I didn't even notice when, after Elite Beat Agents on the DS, the more spectacle style of rhythm game basically dried up completely. I just wasn't paying attention anymore. When I was picking out a rhythm game to play, I was drawn to Rhythm Doctor by word of mouth, but also by its conceit of making a rhythm game out of an EKG, putting the player in the role of a doctor trying to stabilize people's heartbeats. It's cute, playing as a silent intern frantically trying to save lives as the overworked in-person hospital staff tends to other matters. The game tries to get the most out of its core gimmick, press the button on the 7th beat, by obfuscating some of those beats, or building in as many delayed hits as an Elden Ring boss, or asking the player to keep track of multiple rhythms at once. And while the game's visual creativity can't compare to the 90s classics, Mitsuru Nakamura is obviously not a standard it's fair to expect an indie dev to match, the game is still very playful, with trippy effects, layered images, and some real goofball character concepts. Your first patient is a samurai in stereotypical red lacquered armor, and this is juxtaposed with a techno track. Then the samurai comes back with a more irregular heartbeat, and his track becomes a dubstep remix. The game's sense of humor was working on me. Immediately after the samurai is something more saccharine and unlikable, a lovesick kid without much personality, and the game starts bouncing back and forth between conspicuously zany and painfully sincere, the latter being something I liked a lot less. I don't really want to be mean to a small indie team, and I'm inclined to pull my punches here, but this ended up being, no hyperbole, my least favorite soundtrack out of any rhythm game I've played, outside of one exception, a Game Boy Color Japan-only pop and music import that I tried once for about half an hour. And Rhythm Doctor is at its worst wherever there are lyrics. Earlier, I hypothesized that rhythm game fans eventually gravitated towards the Bimani style and away from the Parappa style because the former offer higher challenge, and Rhythm Doctor does in fact offer a higher level of challenge than most of the rest of the Parappa lineage. You can more or less sleepwalk through Space Channel 5, but even by the second chapter out of 7, Rhythm Doctor gets very tricky, and I found myself having to replay stages quite a few times to progress. In DJ Max or Rock Band, if you need to retry a stage, you're right back in it, focused on the gameplay. In Rhythm Doctor, there's a lot of preamble, dialogue, slow build-up before you can actually start pressing buttons. And the game also has a bad habit of long lulls in the stage, during which characters talk. The game also has a habit of switching things up partway through a stage so that you might be acing 70% of a song and then crumple when the curveballs start coming, or new combinations of rhythms appear that you can't deal with without practice. And look, just like in other genres, while I enjoy learning and mastering difficult boss fights, I enjoy much less retrying boss fights when it's a mandatory cutscene, and then an easy phase 1, then another mandatory cutscene, and then I die 6 seconds into phase 2. That does not feel great. If the gameplay and aesthetics are strong enough, I can still enjoy it. But like I said, the storytelling veers towards the saccharine, and the music was not doing it for me, and unfortunately, that meant that I didn't see this one through to the end, stopping after a failed "Am I having fun?" gut check at the end of Chapter 4. Every game in this video series has had other things that I could do at the point when I moved on and started making a video about it. More gold ranks in Burnout, post-game content in Fantasian, harder 1cc's in Nex Machina. But this is the first one I've done a video on that I can't, in any sense, say I completed. I found myself thinking, maybe I should have deferred this bingo square altogether until after the new Rhythm Heaven came out. But I didn't. Oh well. Speaking of, Rhythm Heaven is actually more of what I was looking for, tonally. Pound for pound, that's the most reliably excellent of all of Nintendo's IPs, a distilled, all-killer, no-filler experience with no series entries that are less than excellent. The gameplay is similar to Rhythm Doctor conceptually, much of it being just 1 or 2 buttons, but the music is irresistible, and you don't have the mid-song dead zones that drag the experience down. Because I'm already well acquainted with both DJ Max and Rhythm Heaven from their 2000s entries, I am actually glad I tried something else for this bingo square, even if it just made me want to run right back into the arms of Rhythm Heaven. And I am interested in continuing to try new things in this genre. For example, if I ever get a VR setup, I'm sure the first thing I'll do with it is try Beat Saber. Up next, a genre that I've tried and failed to properly get into for decades. The overhead view, build crafting, monster slaying, loot grabbing, ARPG. There is exactly one ARPG that I think I would rank in my top 10 games of all time, and I have not found a single other that I enjoy even a fraction as much. So, I'll be looking at No Rest for the Wicked, a more atypical entry that mixes in inspiration from Souls-likes and survival games. Believe it or not, this is the first early access game I've ever played, but this is a genre that tends to make major changes between seasons anyhow, so I'm hoping the distinction is somewhat semantic and that No Rest for the Wicked is ready for prime time. We'll find out together.